You think paying a few bills makes you part of this family? You were never more than a placeholder, a charity case we tolerated out of guilt. And now that we're done pretending, get out. He said that to me the night they slid my suitcase across the floor like I was never meant to belong. If you've ever built a home for people who only saw you as convenient, stay with me. It bumped against the edge of the hallway rug with a soft, final thud, as if even the floor was tired of pretending I belonged here. I didn't reach for it. I just stood in the entryway. The door still cracked behind me, letting in the last sting of November air. The grocery bag in my hand crinkled slightly as I tightened my grip. Inside was the smallest cake I could find. Vanilla frosting. Crooked red icing spelling out, "Happy Birthday." I hadn't asked for my name. Didn't seem worth it. The house looked the same as it had every year on this day. Lifeless. The dining room light buzzed overhead, casting everything in a washed-out yellow like a photograph left too long in the sun. The table was already set. Meatloaf, canned green beans, the potatoes with the powdered taste that clung to the back of your tongue no matter how much butter you added. There were 3 plates. One of them was mine. But it didn't feel like a seat at the table. It felt like a formality. Gerald didn't look up from his plate. His fork moved in slow, steady stabs. Eleanor was sitting across from him, posture perfect, eyes on her food like she was waiting for it to offer a distraction. Neither of them spoke. No greeting. No acknowledgement. Just the same mechanical chewing that had filled this house for years. I closed the door quietly behind me, hung my coat on the hook. The cake in my hand suddenly felt absurdly heavy. I set it on the counter, the plastic bag handle leaving a red indentation in my palm. For a moment, I thought about leaving it there, walking right back out, driving until the tank hit empty. But I didn't. I got caught up at work, I said flatly. My voice sounded wrong in this house. Too alive. Gerald grunted, pouring another 2 fingers of whiskey into his chipped glass. Of course you did. I moved to the table, pulled out the chair slowly, trying not to scrape it too loud against the floor. As I sat, I caught a glimpse of the suitcase in the hallway again. Navy blue. My old one. The one I used for job interviews back when I still believed things might get better. It looked cleaner than I remembered. Dinner passed in silence. Forks clinked against plates. Ice cubes cracked in Gerald's glass. A cough from Eleanor. I stared at the grayish meatloaf on my plate and tried to remember the last time this house had felt like home. Tried to pretend I hadn't noticed how quiet it had gotten the past few months. How Eleanor's texts had shifted from "we miss you, sweetie" to "please remember the water bill's due." How Gerald started referring to me as freeloader under his breath when he thought I couldn't hear. Halfway through his plate, Gerald dropped his fork with a clang. The sound made Eleanor flinch. "You're 30, he said, leaning back like he was settling into something. "You've had your time. Pack your things." The words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked. "What?" Eleanor didn't lift her head, just picked at her beans like they were suddenly fascinating. Gerald shrugged. "You're old enough to stand on your own. This isn't a charity." I stared at him. "I pay the internet, the electric. I cover half the mortgage, for God's sake." He smirked. "Paying bills doesn't make you family. It makes you a tenant. And we're evicting." I waited for Eleanor to say something. Anything. But she didn't. She looked smaller somehow, like she was trying to disappear into her cardigan. I felt something tighten in my throat, but I swallowed it back down. "I stayed when you lost your job," I said quietly. "I fixed the roof last winter in the middle of a storm while you were passed out on the couch. I paid for Mom's crown when her tooth cracked because we didn't have dental coverage." He snorted. "You think that buys you a place here forever?" "We didn't ask you to play hero." "No," I thought. "You never asked. You just expected." Every time the lights flickered or a car broke down or the water heater failed, you looked at me. Not with gratitude, with assumption. I pushed my plate away. The food sat heavy in my stomach, or maybe that was something else. A kind of weight I'd been carrying for years without realizing it. I stood slowly. My chair scraped this time, sharp against tile. Neither of them flinched. My eyes landed on the cake again. The bag was slightly fogged from the shift in temperature. I reached for it, fingers brushing the cheap plastic window. Through the condensation, I saw it. One candle. I paused. There should have been two. Maybe I bumped it on the seat. Maybe it was forgotten at the bakery. Or maybe I didn't let the thought finish. Without a word, I picked up the cake, its weight steadier now, and turned toward the stairs. The suitcase waited in the hall, like a dog by the door. I walked past it, the cake tucked in one arm, and began climbing. Each step creaked like it was trying to tell me something. I didn't look back. Rachel carries the cake upstairs, one candle missing. She doesn't cry. Not yet. They kicked me out. So I shut the power off. The glow of my laptop bathed the small living room in pale blue light, the only illumination as midnight slipped past like a thief. Maya's apartment was warm but cluttered. Mismatched furniture, stacks of nursing textbooks on the floor, a couch with springs that sighed every time I shifted. It wasn't fancy, but it didn't hold its breath when I walked in. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, hunched over my laptop like it was a scalpel, and I was prepping for surgery. A yellow legal pad lay beside me, its pages already filled with rows of account numbers, passwords, payment confirmations. I'd written them slowly, carefully, the way someone records last words. Not with rage, but with precision. Electric, gas, water, internet, cable, cell plan, insurance, all in my name. I didn't even remember when it happened. One utility at a time, handed to me like small favors. You're better with computers, sweetie. We're so lucky you're good with money. At first, it felt like trust, then obligation, then ownership. They let me keep the house running while convincing themselves they were doing me a favor by letting me stay in it. Now, it was leverage, and I was finally learning how to use it. I clicked into the power company's portal, the familiar login filling automatically. My hand hesitated just a second over the mouse. Not because I doubted the decision, but because part of me still wanted them to call. To say it was a mistake, that they didn't mean it. They wouldn't. I clicked. Account details loaded. I hovered over auto-pay settings. A dull ache pulsed behind my eyes from staring too long, too hard. The cursor blinked. Remove payment method. Confirm. Confirm again. The screen refreshed. Electric. Disconnected as of next billing cycle. I exhaled slowly. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like relief. Like cutting off the oxygen to something that had been feeding on me for years. The apartment door creaked behind me. Maya stepped in quietly, a steaming mug cupped in her hands. She didn't say anything at first. Just lowered herself onto the couch and watched me work. Her dark curls pulled into a messy bun, scrubs half unzipped from a long shift. "Can't sleep?" she finally asked, voice hushed, not pitying. "Didn't try," I murmured, still staring at the screen. She nodded and held out the mug. I took it, fingers brushing hers. Chamomile. Slightly too sweet, just how I liked it. She never said much when I spiraled like this. Just stayed close enough to catch the pieces if I broke. I moved to the next tab, water company. I'd paid the bills for 3 years after Gerald forgot to, and we went 2 days without running water in January. No heat, no apology. Just him yelling about frozen pipes while I called customer service from the break room at work. Autopay. Off. Card. Removed. Done. Another breath. Another cut cord. I moved through them like steps in a dance I hadn't realized I'd been practicing. Cable, insurance, cell plan. Each time the portal lit up with some version of, "Are you sure?" And each time my answer was quieter but steadier. Yes. The internet portal was the only one that made me pause. It had my profile listed as admin. Beneath it were three others: Dad, Mom, and Family Movie Night. The last one made me snort. We hadn't watched a movie together in over 8 years. I don't even think they knew that profile still existed. Cancel subscription. I clicked. My hand didn't shake. Let's see how much of your world runs without me. I sat back against the couch, the cushions folding around me. My body ached in places I hadn't noticed. A knot between my shoulders, a cramp in my calf, the persistent throb behind my temples. But my mind felt clear, clean. A memory flashed. Last winter, standing on the porch in freezing rain, hammering shingles onto the roof while Gerald shouted instructions from the window with a beer in hand. I'd caught a cold that lasted 3 weeks. He hadn't even come outside. Another flash. Eleanor calling me sobbing from a parking lot, her tires blown on the freeway. I skipped my shift, paid for the tow, bought her new ones. She'd said, "You're a good daughter," like it was a prize I should be grateful for. I opened a new bank account, transferred every dollar I had, disconnected the shared emergency fund, froze the savings they used without asking, not to punish, to preserve. I reached for my pen and began logging everything in neat bullet points, not because I thought they'd ask, because if this ever turned into a war of stories, I wanted to have proof. My truth in ink, not just in memory. Behind me, Maya shifted. I glanced over. She was watching the screen now, eyes scanning the list. "You sure you're okay?" she asked softly. "I wasn't," I said. "For a long time." Her hand found my arm. Just a squeeze. Not an answer. Not a rescue. Just enough. A notification popped onto my phone screen. Voicemail. Unknown number, but I recognized it anyway. Eleanor. I didn't want to listen, but I did. Her voice was soft, almost syrupy. "There must be some mistakes. Call me, honey. We're still family." I let the message play out, then placed the phone face down on the rug. I didn't answer. Not yet. It only took one post to undo years of silence. I saw it first on a Tuesday morning, still half asleep with Maya's cat curled against my leg and the smell of burnt toast wafting in from the kitchen. My phone buzzed with a notification from Carrie, an old coworker I hadn't spoken to in months. "You seen what your dad posted?" There was a link. I hesitated, then tapped. There it was, sprawled across the Brook Hollow community Facebook page like spilled oil on clean pavement. Gerald Marin. "Some daughters are raised to be grateful. Others turn into snakes. After everything we sacrificed, our daughter left us sick, starving, and alone. Pray for us." The post already had over 70 comments. "He raised her. Now she abandons him?" She was always strange. Remember how quiet she was? Kids these days don't know loyalty. I couldn't breathe. My thumb hovered over the screen like it could erase what I was reading if I just stopped looking. My body was still in Maya's apartment, but my mind was back in that house. Hearing the scrape of the suitcase on the floor, feeling the weight of the cake bag cutting into my fingers. I got up, brushed past Maya without a word, and locked myself in the bathroom. The tiles were cold beneath my feet. I sat on the closed toilet lid and stared at the comments like they might start making sense if I just gave them enough time. By noon, it had spread to the neighborhood group, then to the old church's bulletin board, then to the alumni page of my high school. People I barely remembered were piling on, resharing, twisting fragments of truth into a narrative my parents had handed them like gospel. That afternoon at the grocery store, someone whispered as I passed. An old man by the cereal aisle frowned at me. The cashier didn't look me in the eye. When she handed me my change, her fingers didn't touch mine. I walked home with the bag gripped too tightly, knuckles white, cake frosting melting slightly from the small slice Maya had packed with my lunch. Last year, it had sat untouched. This year, I was eating it alone at her table. Somehow, that hurt less. "They're not mad you left," Maya said that evening. "They're mad you didn't ask permission." She was sorting folders from her shift, slipping patient files into color-coded bins. I sat on the floor, scrolling through messages I didn't want to read. Some were neutral, a few angry, most just disappointed. That was the hardest part. How easy it had been to convince people that I was the villain. How quickly people filled in the blanks my parents left behind. "I have to do something," I said quietly. Maya didn't answer right away. She looked up from the desk, eyes steady. "Come here." I stood and walked over. She held out a manila folder, her fingers tight on the edge. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this." I opened it. Inside was a crisp black and white scan. A legal form. At the top, "Last Will and Testament, Harold D. Marin, my grandfather." I scanned the document, then stopped. Paragraph 4. "All property, savings, and assets to be passed in full to my granddaughter, Rachel Marin, as sole beneficiary." There it was. My name. Clear as day. Not Gerald. Not Eleanor. Me. I read it again. And again. "But they told me he left everything to them," I whispered. "They said he didn't think I was stable enough." Maya shook her head. "This was on file. We scanned it when he passed. I found it archived by accident when sorting end-of-year taxes." I felt the blood rush from my face. "They erased me," I said, voice flat. "Legally. All this time. All the overtime shifts I picked up to help with bills. The thousands I poured into a house that was never mine. The guilt they fed me. The shame I swallowed. It wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. A total erasure." My hand trembled as I held the paper. Not from rage. From something quieter. Older. The ache of realizing I had been erased. Not just from love, but from legacy. That night, Maya went to bed early. I didn't. I sat at the table with the will laid flat beside my laptop. The legal pad from earlier now scribbled full of cross-referenced dates, payment receipts, scanned invoices. Every electric bill, every water charge, every gas top-up, internet, insurance, groceries, all logged under my name, all proof. I opened my file browser, selected all receipts, attached the will scan, sat back. The cursor blinked in the email draft box like it was waiting for my courage. But I wasn't going to send anything. Not yet. I closed the email, opened a new document, typed one sentence at the top. "Let's begin. They sued me for abandoning them, but no one asked who abandoned me first." The receptionist at the legal aid office smiled without asking too many questions. Her desk was lined with small, chipped mugs filled with pens and affirmation quotes printed on fading Post-it notes. The lights overhead were clinical, buzzing faintly like every other institution I'd been dragged through before. But this place didn't reek of judgment. Just work. Quiet, steady work. Maya sat beside me in the waiting area, her arms crossed tightly, her fingers twitching the hem of her sleeve like she wanted to punch someone but had already decided not to. She hadn't said much since we parked. Just handed me the folder she'd helped me fill with every document, printout, and receipt we could gather. Her support didn't come with speeches, just presence. "Rachel Marin?" The paralegal called gently from the hallway. I stood, legs stiff from the drive, and followed him past humming printers and the distant ring of office phones. He led us into a small conference room with a rectangular table and a stack of tissues in the center, like they knew some clients bled through their stories. He shook my hand, introduced himself as Daniel, then motioned for us to sit. "Take your time," he said. "Tell me what's happening." I didn't start with the suitcase, or the birthday, or the years of quiet hunger that didn't always come from food. I started with the electric bill, then the water, then the insurance. I laid out my life in line items, a history of small sacrifices written in transaction codes and digital paper trails. For each bill, I handed him a printout. For each loan, a transfer confirmation. My name, my money, their comfort. Daniel listened without interrupting. Occasionally, he underlined something. His eyes flicked from me to the documents like he was trying to match my face to a story someone should have told years ago. "Why did you keep paying?" he asked softly. I exhaled. "Because family isn't supposed to need proof." He nodded once. "Do you have anything else?" I reached into the back of the folder and pulled out a USB. "There's a voicemail from 2 years ago. I didn't even know I still had it." He plugged it into his laptop. I looked away as Eleanor's voice filtered through the speaker. Sugary, rushed, a little breathless. "You just make things so easy, Rachel. Honestly, sometimes I wonder if you'd still write the checks if we told you the truth. But why ruin a good thing?" The room stayed silent after it ended. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Daniel clicked to the next document. "And this?" Maya leaned forward. "My signed statement. I was there the day Eleanor told the clinic records staff to pull a copy of Harold Marin's will. She asked for it quietly. That was 3 days before Rachel got kicked out." His pen paused. "So she knew Rachel was the beneficiary?" Maya nodded. She knew. He folded his hands. "Rachel, with everything you've presented, the payments, the documents, this voicemail, the witness statement, you have a very strong case for financial exploitation, especially in Ohio. The law protects adult children who've been used under false pretenses by guardians or parents." A strange pressure rose behind my eyes. Not tears, not yet. Just confirmation. Not just that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't ungrateful, that what I remembered was real, and what they did was wrong. He slid the last page toward me. "If you'd like to proceed, this is your countersuit. We'll file it immediately." I stared at the page. My name at the top. The same name they tried to erase from every legacy, every story. I picked up the pen. My fingers didn't tremble this time. As I signed, I whispered, "Let's see them pretend now." The weight didn't lift, but it shifted, like I was finally standing on something solid. Later that night, back in Maya's apartment, I sat on the floor with the paper copy of the countersuit beside me. The lights were dim. The cat was curled in the corner. Maya had gone to bed early, again, trusting me to hold my own now. I reached for my phone to check the time and saw the voicemail notification. New message, Gerald Marin. I should have deleted it. I didn't. I hit play. His voice was colder than I remembered, stripped of fake charm. "You'll regret this. Blood always bites back." I stared at the wall, the words echoing in the dark like a threat etched in glass. And yet, beside the couch, tucked under the door earlier that evening, was something else. A card with no return address. Inside, written in clean handwriting, "You were never the problem. Some people just fear the ones they can't control." I placed the card on the coffee table. One threat, one truth. And for the first time in years, I knew which voice mattered more. I didn't need revenge. I needed receipts. The Christmas lights in Maya's apartment blinked softly, a tangled loop across the curtain rod that cast shifting reds and greens onto the living room walls. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon from a candle Maya insisted made the place feel festive, though neither of us had the energy to pretend this year felt anything like a celebration. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, the glow of my laptop illuminating the room more than the fairy lights ever could. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Still. Controlled. The folder on my desktop was already labeled Truth. Inside, every detail I'd once been too afraid to name. Maya sat on the couch behind me, silent but present, a warm blanket draped across her legs, her coffee going cold in her hands. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. We'd rehearsed this moment in our heads for weeks. I clicked New Post. No emojis, no filters, no dramatic introduction. Just this. For anyone who saw the post from my father last month, here is some context you may not have had. Then I began uploading. First, the utility bills. Electric, gas, water, all in my name. Years of payments. scanned statements, auto drafts from my account, dates that lined up with the years I was supposedly freeloading. Next, screenshots of mortgage payments pulled directly from my bank's portal. Every month, every confirmation. Annotated with calm explanations. This covered half the house payment. Every month, unquestioned, unacknowledged. Then came the will. High resolution. My name, front and center, sole beneficiary. I underlined the clause in quiet yellow. No arrows, no all caps, just light, controlled emphasis. After that, the voicemail. Eleanor's voice, clipped and tired. You just make things so easy, Rachel. Honestly, sometimes I wonder if you'd still write the checks if we told you the truth. But why ruin a good thing? I added no commentary. And finally, one line to close. I was told not to make this public. That family business stays in the family. But I've realized this was never mine to protect. It was theirs to hide. I hit post. The spinning wheel turned once, twice, and then it was live. For a moment, nothing happened. I sat back, spine straight, palms flat against the carpet. Maya leaned forward slightly. How do you feel? Clean, I said. Then the notification started. At first, just a few likes, then comments, shares, some supportive, some confused, some accusatory. Then, the tide turned. Underneath Gerald's rebuttal post, rushed and defensive. She's lying. We loved her. She's twisting everything. A woman named Denise commented, I remember seeing her shoveling the driveway alone at 16 while he drank beer on the porch. Another under the will image. I work at the records office. We remember Eleanor asking for this file. She looked nervous, told us not to log the request. Then Mrs. Langford, my old fourth grade teacher, wrote, Rachel used to bring in lunch money late. Said her parents forgot. I never forgot her face when she said it. And then, buried deep in a long thread, a single sentence that hit harder than the rest. She didn't leave you. You used her up. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just closed my laptop, the silence wrapping around me like armor instead of chains. The lights on the curtain blinked again. Red, green, red. Little illusions of comfort. Maya leaned forward. You did it. I started it, I said. My phone buzzed beside me. I turned it over. New notification, Franklin County Civil Court. Subject line, trial date confirmed, January 1st. South, that was next. New Year's Day. A new beginning. For me and the end of the lie. Franklin County Courthouse sat beneath a sky the color of unspoken things. Gray, unmoving, cold, without cruelty. The wind bit at my coat collar as Maya and I climbed the courthouse steps, the chill tightening around us like a last test of resolve. Inside, the heat was clinical, almost apologetic. The walls echoed with the faint clack of shoes and the weight of quiet battles being waged behind thin wooden doors. Courtroom 3B wasn't full, but the tension still pressed down like fog. Gerald sat at the plaintiff's table in a stiff suit he hadn't bothered to press. Eleanor beside him, eyes red, a tissue clutched like a prop. They didn't look at me when I entered. I didn't offer them the chance. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a tired posture, called us to order. Gerald's lawyer rose first. His voice was measured, laced with indignation, just this side of theatrical. Your Honor, our clients were abandoned by their daughter, a woman they housed, fed and supported well into adulthood. What followed was a series of retaliatory actions that left them financially and emotionally devastated. He gestured toward the bench with the cadence of someone who had practiced empathy more than he'd felt it. She revoked critical services, closed shared financial accounts, and spread damaging claims online. We seek damages for emotional distress, defamation, and abandonment of care. The judge nodded. Ms. Marin, your response? I stood. No podium, no theatrics. just the weight of proof in my hands. "I'd like to submit the following documents," I said, handing the folder to the clerk. "Receipts of all utility bills, insurance, mortgage payments, and bank transfers under my name for the last 6 years, including the months following my grandfather's death." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at my parents. I just walked them, and everyone else through the math of truth. I also have a scanned copy of my grandfather's will, naming me as sole beneficiary. This copy was verified and time-stamped by the Brook Hollow Clinic's archives. Maya took the stand next. Her voice didn't shake. I watched Eleanor Marin request the will be pulled from storage. I also heard her tell staff not to log the request under the patient file. It was clear she didn't want a trail. The courtroom stayed silent. Then came the voicemail. I handed the judge a small speaker and let Eleanor's words from 2021 fill the space. "You just make things so easy, Rachel. Honestly, sometimes I wonder if you'd still write the checks if we told you the truth. But why ruin a good thing?" Gerald stiffened. Eleanor wept. Small, contained tears that didn't touch her eyes. The judge's expression didn't change. She reviewed the documents for several long minutes, flipping through each page with the focus of someone who knew the weight of silence better than anyone in the room. When she finally looked up, her voice was quiet, but firm. "This court finds no legal basis for the claim of abandonment. Ms. Marin's financial contributions were voluntary, yes, but extensive, continuous, and consistently unacknowledged. Her actions after being asked to leave the property reflect a withdrawal of support, not malice." She turned to my parents. "It is the opinion of this court that the plaintiffs misrepresented both the nature of their relationship and the financial dependence involved. Any future public defamation may result in formal sanctions." Silence. No victory music, no gasps. Just fact. Just freedom. I gathered my folder, turned toward the door. As I passed them, Gerald leaned slightly forward, his voice low and bitter. "You'll regret turning on us." I stopped, met his eyes. "I regret waiting so long to stop turning on myself." And then I walked out. The cold air felt different this time. Not cruel, cleansing. The sky was still gray, but the kind that promised snow, not storm. Maya didn't follow me out. She knew I needed to finish this part alone. By noon, I stood in the doorway of my new apartment. The key was warm from being clutched in my palm too long. The space was small, sunlit, and still smelled faintly of fresh paint. My boxes waited in corners. The windows rattled faintly from wind, but it was mine. I closed the door behind me, took off my coat, reached into the last unpacked box and pulled out the old cake topper. Cheap plastic, one bent edge. I set it on the shelf above my desk, next to a framed copy of the will. Not as a wound, as a trophy. Sometimes survival doesn't roar. Sometimes it just breathes. I looked around the room and smiled. Small, real. Family is not who you were born to. It's who sees your worth without a receipt. The wind outside eased, and so did the past. On the first morning of a new year, the truth walked out of the courtroom, quiet, undeniable, and no longer needing permission. What began as silence turned into proof, and what once felt like betrayal transformed into clarity. Justice didn't roar in fury. It unfolded in paper trails and unwavering resolve. When injustice is met with calm conviction, the verdict speaks louder than vengeance ever could. Some doors close with pain, others open with peace. And sometimes that's the real victory. If this story meant something to you, share it. Subscribe for the next chapter. We're just getting started.